Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today is Mora Yehudis Fishman, affectionately called Mora because Mora means teacher, and she's been a teacher of Chassidus and Torah for the last 40, 50 years. She also has run and was a spiritual mentor and director for many Jewish organizations in Santa Fe as well as Colorado. Welcome, Mora Yehudis. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here among so many extraordinary people.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I found so extraordinary about Mora Yehudis' story is how she got a very personal connection with the Rebbe. She is going to tell us a little bit about her background, but coming from the background that she came from, it was really astounding how she felt that the Rebbe became kind of like a father figure for her. So you had to start us off. Tell us a little about your background, about your parents, and where you came from.
Okay. So I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. My parents were both Russian immigrants, and my mother had cerebral palsy. My father was a deaf mute. And they both had their own stories, but like I realized a little while ago that one of the ways I must have found God is when I was a little baby, and I might have been crying like babies do. My father couldn't hear me, and my mother couldn't get to me so quickly. So
Wow.
Somewhere in the space, I brought down a higher spirit. So
amazing. What was it like growing up in that kind of household?
Well, my father passed away when I was 11 years old. His yahrzeit is actually coming up next week, Chavdalid Sivan. And another kind of very unusual thing was his funeral was the day of my elementary school graduation. And my parents had been divorced, so I didn't know about it. I woke up in the morning, and my mother said, "You've got to go to school." I had to perform a lullaby that I wrote, and she said, "Your father passed away. I'm going to the funeral, but you must go to fulfill your, responsibility in school." So that in itself was such a tormented moment. But as I got older, I realized my song, my lullaby started, "Lay down your weary head and close your sleepy eyes and dream of all the things in the world you idolize." So who was singing that? It couldn't be me. I was just a little girl at the time. So I realized it must have been my father singing to me. And when I heard...
This was the lullaby that you were singing at your graduation?
Yes.
Wow, and you wrote this lullaby?
Right.
Wow. And you really thought afterwards that this is really your father comforting you and singing that to you. I mean, you were a young daughter. You were a young child. You were...
Right, 11, yeah.
11 years old at the time. Wow.
Right. Yeah. So my mother basically raised me, and she sent me to Maimonides, which is a modern Orthodox Jewish day school. They called it a parochial school at the time. And in the sixth grade, my mother wanted to take me out, but I said, no, I've got to continue with this Jewish education. I got a very good background in Judaism in terms of information, but it wasn't until I went to overnight camp as a teenager that I realized kids aren't just learning about this, they're actually living it 24/7. So that's how I kind of got more, and involved into wanting to make Judaism my own. A funny story, when I started to keep kosher on my own, my mother wanted to take me to a restaurant, and I said no. The only way I'm going to go is if I have some kind of a salad. I don't want anything, like substance, it's questionable. So I was eating the salad, and the waiter comes over to me and says, "Young lady, how do you like your lobster salad?" And immediately I threw up, and just instinctively. And then I realized I must be taking this seriously. So,
wow. How old were you at that time?
Probably soon after my father passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you react to your father's passing and your mother being, having cerebral palsy? Like, what was it like to grow? Did you feel lonely growing up? Did you feel depressed? Did you
Well,
feel?
I, all of the above probably, but I think mostly I had a weird kind of. So my mother used to belong to the Cerebral Palsy Club, and she would take me there, and I think I weirdly had some kind of survivor's guilt. Why does everybody around me
Mm,
have some kind of handicap? And Baruch Hashem, I'm functional. So
wow. So aside from growing up like that, you also felt guilty.
right, that's right,
Guilty with that. Wow.
right.
Wow. So you had a lot on your shoulders that you were carrying as a child and as a young adult.
I guess
How
so.
how did that translate into your finding, like, how did you find the Rebbe? Where did you find him? How did you get connected?
um, well, I I was friends with some girls who went to Lubavitch Day School, even though I didn't go there. I went to Maimonides, and somehow I don't remember exactly how I heard about the Rebbe, and I love to read, and I came across the Friedrich Rebbe's the memoirs of the previous Rebbe, and I was enamored by that idea that I could there could be religious holy people in the world and still be connected to the earth and want to improve civilization, so to speak. And I don't remember what the first impetus to write to the Rebbe. There was somebody on my street, a young man at the time, who also went to Lubavitch Boys School, and I talked to him, and he told me, I think, a little bit more about the Rebbe. But at some point, I decided, I asked, how do people connect to him? And they said they have appointments with him or they write letters. So I decided to write a letter. I don't remember the exact circumstances of how that happened, but foolishly, I don't have any. I didn't save any letters, but I did get several letters, and the Rebbe just encouraged me to continue in my kind of new connected Jewish lifestyle. And at some point, when I was graduating high school, that was a really significant event. I had an interview with Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was the dean of the school at the time. I mean, I didn't have much connection with him while in school, but every graduate, there were 18 graduates, and they all had to have a Yehudis, so to speak, with Rabbi Soloveitchik. So I went to him and he said, "You're getting good marks, I see. Which college you're going to?" I said, I didn't think about going to college at this point. So he said, "You should. Every Jewish boy and girl at this point needs to go to college." And that was his philosophy. So I decided to write to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe didn't tell me not to go to college, but he said a very important principle that he, he said when you graduate high school, it's very important to have a if you're going to college, to have a yardstick to measure what's being thrown at you, given to you. So it's important to get a year of solid Jewish education if I can. So
Hmm.
that's when I had a teacher who
You mean before ideas are being thrown at you, you should know what Judaism teaches and
right.
what's our perspective on it.
That's
You
right.
should have a solid background.
Right, to measure
Uh,
what's acceptable and what's not from a Jewish perspective. Uh,
mhm.
so so I went to Beis Yaakov in Williamsburg, and about almost a year later, I got engaged, and I went to the Rebbe for a bracha, and the Rebbe said, he gave me a bracha, but he said, "Did you tell Rabbi Soloveitchik you got engaged?" And I answered kind of flippantly at that young age. I said, "No, I don't even know him. I saw him one time," and the Rebbe smiled and said, "Well, you gave him agmas nefesh, you gave him aggravation when you listened to me instead of him. So now give him a little nachas, give him a little cause to be happy for you."
Oh,
So,
wow. Wow.
yeah.
So you didn't go to college. You went instead to a teacher's seminary program, a training like an advanced Jewish program, and getting to your to your dating. You also had opportunity to write to the Rebbe when you were when you were going out with different people,
Right.
when you had prospective people that you wanted to marry.
Right.
Tell us a
Right.
little about that.
Yeah. So the first was an elderly couple who wanted me to go to meet their brother in Israel, uh, who was the head of a Sephardic yeshiva there, and so that was one thing I asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave me another kind of very sweet answer. He said, "You're here, he's there. You're Ashkenaz, he's Sephard. Take it off. Nemes harufa, our agenda. Take it off your agenda." So that was a very clear fatherly advice at
So
that point.
he felt you were from just a completely different culture, a completely different place. You were here in America and you didn't understand what was going on there.
Right, right.
Interesting. And then there was another time that you actually went to the Rebbe. This was you actually saw the Rebbe in person,
Yeah,
or
yeah. Well, both times. The
both
both.
times?
Yeah,
Both times you went to the Rebbe. So you write about how one time you were actually sitting and crying outside of 770. You were lost, and I could, understanding your background, it makes it clear now. Like, you had no one really, no father figure. Your father passed away. Your parents were in a different world, not only because they were immigrants, but also your mother had cerebral palsy. She was dealing with so much, and you must have felt very alone at that point in time.
yeah. Absolutely. And I think uh, before the other story, so just I wanted to ask the Rebbe's advice, basically. And that was particularly if I should go to Israel at that time. So that's I didn't know how to make an appointment. So that's when I went to 770. I just sat on the stairs and started crying. And Rabbi Mentlik, one of the Rebbe's advisor, secretary, came over to me and said, "What's wrong?" And I told him the situation. He said, "Wait here," and he goes in. He gets an appointment the very next day with the Rebbe. So that was
Which was so unusual. I mean, appointments could take months in advance,
right.
and here you were given an appointment the next day. That's spectacular. And what happened the next day?
So that's when I came in and asked him. That's when he told me, take it off your agenda. That was
Oh,
about
take
the
it off
man
your
in Israel.
agenda.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And then a little while later, somebody introduced me to someone in Crown Heights. And we went out, I think, just on one or two dates. And I went to the Rebbe also to ask him. And the Rebbe asked me, how do I feel about this man? And I said to him, I guess I have just kind of regular, basic love of Israel, Avas Yisrael. And the Rebbe again gave me a big smile and he said, "For a husband, you should have more than regular Stam Avas Yisrael." So,
So the Rebbe was really telling you have to really love your spouse. It's
right.
not just have regular feelings of companionship even, but you really have
That's
to feel a certain attraction,
right.
an attraction to him, and
Right.
a deep love.
Right.
That's interesting. How as a girl did you take that advice? What did you think about that?
I think basically, um, I'm not sure. I mean, again, I had no family to have, express feelings, have connections, and nobody to talk to about my inner feelings about things. So I appreciated it so much, Uh, Psychologically, I thought, thank you, Hashem, thank you, God, for giving me this wonderful person who can give me such good advice like a father would.
Wow. Wow. You wrote once that you looked at the Rebbe as just this father figure who had such unconditional love for you. And and it's really apparent in the different experiences that you had. Later on when you were already a teacher, you went on to become a teacher, and you were feeling at the time quite lonely. Can you
Right.
tell us a little about that story?
Um, yeah, so I wrote to the Rebbe. I didn't see him in person at that time. I don't even remember what year it was, but like a couple of things the Rebbe said. You should know a teacher should never feel lonely. I saw he wrote that to people, other people also, because it's like the idea of pay it forward. You're
Mm.
teaching somebody, and the gift keeps on giving. Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
I once went to a wedding of a girl who I taught in the second grade, and she was so happy to see me. I guess it was in New York, and she said, "Yeah," and she was saying Psalms. She was reading Tehillim, and she said, to call it more Yehudis. Anytime I open a siddur, I remember all the songs that you taught us when you gave such joy in davening and praying to God. So
Wow.
that's
Wow.
yeah,
So I mean, I guess that's a great perspective that you can always feel that joy because you know that you gave to somebody who is also giving to somebody else. And
right,
it just keeps spreading out.
right.
That's, when you think about it, anytime you really make someone happy or do something for another person, all the more so a teacher who does that for their students
Right, it
is
creates a ripple effect of Torah continuing to spread. Yeah.
right. Wow. And that's something that you've made your career. Your career has been in education and teaching.
Basically, I started as soon as I graduated high school, and I taught every grade from kindergarten to 12th grade. And my favorite is the second grade because I love like 7 to 8 year olds. Their minds are just starting to open, and they don't get jaded by the school process. So,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
And I once taught a group of girls, just like 6 girls, 3 years in a row. And by the time we got to the third year, nobody had to finish a sentence. Yeah, we had such synchronicity, connection with each other. We could figure out what's going on in their minds. So
Interesting. And I guess that's why you're affectionately known as Mora Yehudis because you're real the epitome of a Mora, of a teacher.
yeah, when I came here to Boulder, a lot of people are not necessarily in any religious circles, but they want to be called Rebbe. That's like a generic term, mainly from the renewal group, but everybody is Reb, whatever it is, Reb Shlomo, whatever the name is. So I said thanks, but no thanks. I'm happy to be called Mora. So like I
Mora.
take a back seat, but when they have a list of names of people, everybody else's name starts with Reb. My name stands out with Mora. So
Mora. Well, you definitely stand out in that position. Tell us a little about, there was another time that you went to the Rebbe also that you actually had a list of questions. Tell us about that story.
Okay, that I consider that my kind of Hasidic birthday. That when that happened because uh, I I had like some personal questions to ask the Rebbe, my relationship, and my ex-husband, whatever was going on in my life, and
How old were you at that time?
um, let's see, it must have been in around in my 30s, I think.
In your 30s.
Yeah, in my
So you married and you got divorced from your husband?
Yeah, yeah. I got married at 18 and got divorced around in my 30s, I think 36, if I remember. But before my divorce, I went to the Rebbe and I had a whole series of kind of religious, personal questions. And then I went into but while I was standing outside of the office door, waiting for my turn, it was already 2 o'clock in the morning and I was half asleep and I was
For those that don't know, when the Rebbe, at that time, the Rebbe had Yehudis, which was private meetings with people, and it would go throughout the night. People would be waiting there. Obviously, the Rebbe wanted to see so many people, and I mean, so many people wanted to see the Rebbe, and the time slots would they would be set, but many people would go over their time slots, and the Rebbe would encourage them to keep on asking their questions. So Maria Hudis was waiting there outside in the office and the outside of the Rebbe's personal office, waiting for her turn. Go ahead and tell
yeah,
us.
yeah. So I wrote
And it
down some.
stretched till the early hours of the morning, I guess.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I wrote down some just a little teeny scrap of paper, some kind of theological questions you could say, drink here.
Sure.
And I forgot all about it. I put it back in my pocket because it was an hour later till I actually got in. And I come in and I ask my personal questions. It took about 20 minutes, and the secretary comes in trying to pull me out, but the Rebbe kind of motions him to leave. And I'm ready. I finish my personal questions and I back off like people do to the door. And the Rebbe said, "Don't you have any more questions? Haben nicht kein andere Kasches?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I do," as a matter of fact. And I had forgotten about them, but the Rebbe knew
That you had
somehow.
other things on your mind that you
Right,
really were bothered by.
right.
And could you tell us a little about,
Yeah, yeah.
those
A
other
few of them.
questions?
I don't. There were five questions. I only remember four, and again, foolishly, I didn't really write them down afterward, but I do remember them because imprinted on my mind because it was like a fantasy come true that the Rebbe would actually, be open to addressing those questions. So one of them was how do you know the truth of the Torah? Because there are other religions that claim to be divine. So the Rebbe gave me an elaborate answer, basically that Judaism is the only religion where you have, 600,000 people claim, testifying to hear the actual same thing. And the surprising thing that the Rebbe added, he said, he I guess he knew I was interested in mythology because he said, take for example Merlin the magician, and he's written about so much, but nobody knows if he was real, when he lived, how he lived, all the circumstances, all like fog surrounding his life. So he brought that in contrast to the Torah, where there's an unbroken chain of eyewitness testimony. So
Wow.
that was a very
Interesting.
funny example. I thought, oh, well, the Rebbe knows about Merlin.
So he knew exactly where you were at and what you were reading.
Right, exactly. That's
Wow.
right. Yeah,
Very in tune with your mind.
right. So
Interesting.
that was one question. Another question was, if how do you know what kinds of commandments to be drawn after? Things that are very easy for you, that come easy to you, or things that are very difficult for you? So, which one should you pursue more intensely?
You mean
So
if you're a personality that is easy to do things, should you do those things that are easy for you, or should you do things that are more difficult,
challenging. That's
more
right. That's right.
challenging?
Right.
Uh-huh.
So his answer was that in in um, in the times that we're living in, especially the pre-Mashiach, you know, pre-Messiah time. So I think he quoted the Talmud that says, "This world is like a wedding." When it comes to the hors d'oeuvres, before the main course, grab and eat. Chatof echol.
Uh,
So basically, it was saying whatever God puts in your path, that probably is meant for you to follow. So
Interesting.
that was
And so many things are put in our path, so we don't look at it as opportunities, but those are the ones that just grab it, eat it.
right,
Interesting.
right.
Wow,
And
that's
and
important.
and one more, I think, also very important. Um, in the first chapter of Tanya, it talks about how uh, different kinds of souls, and he says about the souls of non-Jews are basically when non-Jewish people even do good things, it's mainly for their own gratification.
Mhm.
And so I asked the Rebbe, like, how is there such a big distinction in Hasidic philosophy? And I know other people get bogged down by that, and so I think the Rebbe's answer was important. First of all, he said that directive or description does not apply to what's called the the nations of the world, the righteous people of the world, Chasidei
Mhm.
Umos Ha'olam,
Mhm.
and those people have kind of their own direct connection to God in their own way through the seven Noahide laws. And also, he said that if a person doesn't believe in God, doesn't follow the Torah, why should they do something good? Because it makes them feel good. It's
Mm-hmm.
great, but it's basically based on personal gratification rather than serving a higher power. So that
Mm-hmm.
that that kind of makes sense.
Right. You want your own, even if you're doing something good, you want to do it because if it makes you feel good and feel purpose and meaning in it.
Right.
Interesting. There was also another thing that you spoke about with the Rebbe that you asked about men and women, I think, right? About women and men. Why is there so many laws about men and women in the
Oh yeah,
Torah?
yeah, right. That was another one about that. That
What?
that was very strict, right? The um, the guidelines between men and women seemed very strict to me, as whatever a girl growing up in the 60s,
Right.
50s and 60s. So he said basically that, how did he put it? I think he said it's like atomic power. I think that was his analogy, and that, those relationships are very, very strong and intense, and therefore it depends how you use it. If you use it negatively, it can cause chaos, havoc in your world. But if you use it positively, it brings new holy life into the world,
Mhm.
and brings that an example of that connection between humans and gods in the most powerful way. So that was
Right.
basically
Wow. Yeah, it's a very powerful tool. It could be used for
right.
destruction or it could be used for tremendous, amazing things. Wow. Wow. Um, you also had a time, I mean, these are amazing encounters that you had with the Rebbe. There was also a time that you actually made the Rebbe laugh. Can you tell us about that?
Okay. So there was a custom once a year for women to go. Well, this I didn't tell you also, but two things. Uh, to, to go past the Rebbe was sitting on his chair, and women would file by one at a time and ask for blessings, or give over some information to the Rebbe. So there was a time that the Rebbe was teaching about a verse from the book of Job that said, a person is born to labor, to toil, to labor. Adam la'amal yulad in the Hebrew. And the Rebbe had been talking about it before, the women passed by. And I'd been learning something related to that talked about the word la'amal for toil, to stand for four words: Lilmod Almanas Lilamed, learning for the sake of teaching, like we kind of talked about before. Pay it forward.
Right.
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 So I was excited. When it came my turn to pass by the Rebbe, so instead of asking for something, or a blessing, or sharing some news, I said, "Does the Rebbe know that this word stands for the abbreviation of learning for the sake of teaching?" And the Rebbe said, "I know about that commentary, but the literal meaning is also true." And after I passed by, the person behind me said, "Did you know you?" The Rebbe laughed for a minute after you passed by, and the other thing, I didn't tell you this, but the this blew me away, and I tell people about it all the time. One time, oh, another meeting of the women was after Lag BaOmer, because the women's convention was usually the week before Shavuos, and I I was teaching teenage girls at the time, and Lag BaOmer, like this year, came out on a Sunday, and people were building floats all over the country, maybe all over the world, to represent Jewish sites. And I got my girls to help me build a site of what's called Mekomos HaKadoshim, the holy places in Israel. So there was one kind of like chicken wire, presentation about the wall, one about the tomb of Rachel, and one about Hebron. Yes. So I've been up 48 hours helping the girls build this, and and when it came my turn to pass by the Rebbe, I didn't say anything about her, but the Rebbe, just from his own cognizance, said that I'll say it in Yiddish and then translate it. And du sagst, du kennst tun, alles, was du willst. And you see, you can do whatever you want to do. And this is my most foolish remark in my own life. I kind of pushed it away, and I said, I never said I couldn't. So that's my biggest regret, because instead of like internalizing that blessing, basically what it was, I, I deflected it. So now every time I tell it, I feel I create more of an opening to be able to take in that blessing.
The blessing. Wow. I think your life really reflects how you do whatever you put your mind to doing.
Thank you.
I mean, you've gone on to teach. Your varying teaching career has been from children, to 12th grade in Massachusetts. Then you've moved to Boulder, Colorado, and Santa Fe, where you were before Boulder, where your life is spent really teaching Torah and teaching Hasidus. Reflecting back now on, your relationship with the Rebbe and how it started, what do you feel now about that whole relationship and how it really molded you into who you became?
Yeah, I would say it was probably the most significant relationship in my whole life. Of course, I'm grateful to my parents for bringing me into the world, for my teachers teaching me Torah in school. But in terms of personal guidance and as a model for love of other people, and also continually learning Torah. Oh, another thing I don't think I mentioned, another time probably ask the Rebbe, should women be learning Hasidic teachings, mystical teaching, as much as men? And the Rebbe said, very specifically, that these teachings are meant to convey relationships between people and God, and understanding of the soul, and all those ideas are equally important to women as to men. So that gave me another sense of direction and fortification of the path that I was trying to pursue.
Wow. Yeah, and you were pursuing this at a time when women's education, especially in Judaism and in the secular world as well, was not. So, I mean, nowadays people are much more into women pursuing education and higher education. But at the time that you were pursuing this knowledge and this education, women were not so learned. And yet you became that example. Did the Rebbe guide you in that way? Did you feel that you got the guidance from the Rebbe to motivate you to do more in that
Yeah,
learning?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the process of writing some books, and one of the first books that I wanted to write, hopefully I'll get there too, is about Hasidic perspectives about women in the Torah, and not just from Chabad, from other different Hasidic sources. And the kids that I was telling uh, uh, them about, they actually they actually reminded me, they're grandmothers now, and they're reminding me about, so new, when is that book coming out already?
Wow. Wow. It's nice to hear that you still have like dreams and hopes for the future of what you want
Absolutely.
to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You also wrote a book already. You want to tell us a
yeah,
little about your
yeah,
book?
sure. So, um, uh, again, Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence has been, I tell people, if you have trouble with God and the Torah, think about divine providence in your life. Think about what other people call coincidences in your life. And I've had so many of them. I might even write about that too at some point. Uh, but at one point, several years ago, I met this young man who happens to be the brother of the governor in Colorado, and he was becoming religious, and he wanted to start his own publishing company. And he asked me what kind of books I want to write, and I told him a bunch of ideas. I said, he latched on to one idea, uh, actually based on the Rebbe's, the Rebbe's emphasis on celebrating birthdays in our time, which is also pretty radical
Mm.
compared to previous years. So he published this book that I wrote. It's called Garden of Time, and it's basically based on the Rebbe's idea of celebrating blessings, and also the model that the Rebbe had of every year of his life, giving a teaching connected with that number. So
Mm.
my book is like blessings from 1 to 100, based on every year, and it has like just some beautiful, you can't really see here, but artwork and mandalas in it. And I come to 100, and I say, how come? People ask me how come I didn't write to 120. So I say, if you get to page 100, my book, you can figure out your own blessings already.
Your own blessings tell.
so,
Wow.
so
Wow. Do you mind telling us what birthday you're approaching, or is that too personal?
I just passed. This year has been like a year of parties for me because I passed my 80th, uh, my 80th birthday, which happened to be on the second day of Sukkot.
Wow.
But then that reminds me what I just told you before. The first time I actually not saw the Rebbe in person, but heard him in person, was on Simchas Torah.
Mm.
And the year that the Rebbe was still teaching different tunes on his own in the morning. But so a counselor in camp uh, walked walked from walked from Crown Heights to Borough Park to walk me back to Crown Heights, and that was the year that the Rebbe taught this song that's sung all over. Ata v'chartanu, you have chosen us for all the nations, and the Rebbe sang that song personally. 5 o'clock in the morning on Simchas Torah, and I was up all night, obviously, and I consider that also part of my Hasidic birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. From all from all the correspondence, from all the teachings of the Rebbe, and you obviously have learned so much of Hasidic teachings. What do you feel has made the biggest impact on your life?
All right, there's so many, but there's one that stands out, especially in recent years. Something I read about a book that I recommend to a lot of people about the Rebbe's teaching called Positivity Bias by
Mm.
Mendel Kalmsted. I love that book. I gave it out. I love giving out books to people. So I think it was there, or maybe in some other writing, but it really kind of guides me in life. Somebody asked the Rebbe if he was happy. So the Rebbe said, I'm always happy, but I'm never satisfied.
Mm.
And that's such a great motto to have. Yeah. So to feel that whatever you're doing is important, significant, makes an impact on this world and beyond. But at the same time, you shouldn't feel complacent and keep on going. So that's
And that seems to be your motto in life. You just keep on going. It also strikes me that that's so much what the Rebbe was saying to you as well when he said to be happy because you're a teacher and your teaching is causing others to also teach and to grow and to learn. And that keeps on having a ripple effect. So you almost want to keep on teaching because of that. You want to keep on doing it, yet realize what you're doing, but at the same time, don't feel complacent, but keep going with it.
yeah, and now that's why I don't have so much physical energy to teach in person, but that's why another time I mentioned I was depressed, and I came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "So what does make you happy?" So I said, "Writing." Yeah. When I was in elementary school, I was like the editor of my elementary school newspaper, yeah. And so the Rebbe said 2 words, and again that gave me so much direction in your life. So if what makes you happy is writing, so write. So
Right.
that's keeping me going, even when I'm more kind of homebound.
Wow, that's a new direction of your life, the new
Yeah,
teaching that your life has taken on.
right.
Wow. Mora Yehudis Fishman, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your stories, your memories. I wish you blessing with health and with strength and only good things till 120 to keep on doing the teachings and keep on passing on the teachings and the beautiful messages that you teach to so many.
Thank you, and hopefully, uh, before I'm 120, Mashiach will be here, and we'll all continue to grow on the good path that we're on.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, there were so many messages from that interview with Yehudis Fishman. It's almost hard to encapsulate them. So many different varied teachings from the Rebbe that the Rebbe taught her about so many aspects of life, practical aspects of life, from who you're marrying, how it should be somebody that you really love, to not just regular love, to who you should be going after, to her career, to her teachings, to encouraging her to constantly be growing and constantly be doing. What really struck me is this relationship that she had with the Rebbe. You know, here's a girl who's coming from a difficult background. Both her parents were not able to be there for her. She came from a home where the parents were divorced. Her father was deaf. He passed away when she was a young girl, 11 years old. Her mother has cerebral palsy, going through her own issues. And you can just imagine this girl did not have really who to ask her questions to, who to connect with. Later on in life, she married, she got divorced. There's this loneliness that is in, this loneliness at the same time as this wisdom and this tremendous power and ambition that she had. And it was beautiful to hear how the Rebbe guided her through her life and guided her at various times in her life to keep on going. I loved personally the teaching about a teacher. Why should you be depressed when you know that you're teaching others and those are going to be teaching others? And if we could look at the ripple effects of the deeds that we do and see that the deeds that we do are not just about us doing something, but it's having a ripple effect in our world. And if we can view it in such a way, it just makes it a lot more of an optimistic view of the world at large. And this is something that I feel we can all take as a message for ourselves. Just doing something for another, whether it's teaching another, whether it's reaching out to another, whether it's showing a kindness to another, the ripple effect of them then paying it forward to another can really create just a very different world that we live in. If you enjoy watching these videos, I hope you are subscribed to receive them by email, Chabad.org/extraordinary. As well, we have these on all podcast platforms. So if you're going for a walk, if you're cooking in your kitchen, if you're doing exercises, you could just have it playing in the background while you're doing things and listen to the inspiration of so many beautiful women and men out there who are just doing tremendous, extraordinary things in their lives to make our world a better world. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. We love to hear your feedback. Please drop us a note, drop us a like, tell us what you're thinking. And again, I read every single one of those, and I love to hear from you. Thank you again for being part of the extraordinary community.